Looking back at the early 2000s, it's absolutely insane how many games were coming out. The era had an incredible first few years with games. Panzer Dragoon Orta, Devil May Cry, Ace Combat 4, Sonic Adventure 2, Ikaruga, Smash Melee, Super Monkey Ball, Metroid Prime, Halo 1, Jet Set Radio Future, Final Fantasy X, Resident Evil Remake? The early aughts were absolutely unreal. I don't think it's crazy to say that this era of games is extremely strong. In this age of video game genre refinement, it's so unfortunate that Armored Core 3 gets lost in the sauce, because it and Silent Line deserve to be remembered right alongside those games. They're both fantastic games that refined the AC formula to its apex, achieving this great blend of gameplay, story, and aesthetic. They aren't perfect games, and they have their moments of frustration, but they come together to be fantastic. Armored Core 3 is the one I played most growing up, so keep that in mind as I talk about it. Armored Core 3's intro is stark, melancholic, and intense. It starts with the Raven taking flight, as the camera zooms to the battlefield to show two ACs wiping out some smaller enemies. Even with this small fight, they leave nothing of value behind, just destruction. Then reinforcements arrive in the form of two opposing ACs, and they do battle. The fights are desperate and expands throughout the rest of the city. As they fight, they get more and more damaged, but by this point, the fight is for survival's sake. This intro is successful at showing off new mechanics and parts, like the 2v2 battling, the orbiting weapon cores, and weapon purging, while still keeping all four ACs unique in part selection to show off how deep the customization can be. It ends with this amazing shot of the final AC, staring down at this wreck that used to be a different AC, with the light seeping in and overwhelming the scene. The music is sad but appropriate, and it matches up with the moments. The shot composition is great throughout, the tech behind the visuals are still great, and all of this combines to create what is probably my favorite intro in the entire series. It's got soul. The intro mission starts in Train City, and you're given an on-site briefing to clear out the area of battle MTs as your Ravens test. You share this training mission with another 2B pilot, Apple Boy. You both work to clear out the city, and there is friendly fire. This is a great intro mission. It gives you a lot of space to learn your AC's controls and a friend to help you out. Now, the controls have not changed since Armored Core 2 Another Age, where you have tank controls on the D-pad and left stick, strafing and looking up and down all on the shoulder buttons, and the rest of your actions on the four face buttons L3 and R3. By the time this game came out, these controls were starting to become a problem. More and more games were standardizing how games felt to control, and Armored Core was starting to fall behind in this respect. The industry was moving fast, and some games were being left behind for vain reasons. This game offers rebinding, but not two directions on the thumbsticks. By this point, it feels like they were being a little stubborn. I'm fine with these controls because I'm used to them, but I can see why people nowadays would look at this and just say no. There are some new gameplay mechanics to this game, that being with the chest pieces, the cores, that got further refinement. Some cores don't offer an overboost, which is the really fast boost. Instead, they offer what's called an exceed orbit, basically a turret you can activate on your core that does not require a lock-on. These have ammo and require energy to fire, but when not in use, the ammo slowly regenerates. It's a decent option if you are already content with your average boost speed. There's also the option to drop weapon parts in this game with the purge mechanic. If a weapon is out of ammo or you need that extra speed from dropping weight, you can get rid of it if you hold all of the shoulder buttons and press triangle or circle. I don't find it useful often enough to use it consistently, so I didn't use it very much in this title. This game is a bit faster speed-wise than the other games, so getting used to the basics of running and gunning is pretty useful to say the least. If you are used to these controls and you rinse the first few enemies in this intro mission, extra enemies will appear for you to fight.
This isn't part of a scheduled test. You'll have to manage it. All enemy units destroyed. You did well. You both performed well. Welcome to the ranks of an elite few. Ravens.
Objective achieved.
The menus are new and flashy, while still being useful. They are functionally the same as older games, but get some polish and extra functionality. Now, you could have multiple ACs as separate loadouts in Armored Core 2, but AC3 makes this more obvious by having each one on the screen in the garage menu. Having these is great. You can use these for specific loadouts if you want some for specific situations, or if you want to have different machines with different looks. The shop is now integrated into the garage, which saves a lot of time from going back and forth between menus. You can also sell stuff in the assembly menu, which is such a good quality of life feature. You can compare what parts you want to sell to what you already own, and how they fit into your current build. The help menu has been integrated into all of the screens of the game. You can press select and check out what each stat means and why they're important. Integrating the help menu into the game menus is a major step up in accessibility. It makes getting answers to questions and clarifying confusion much easier to solve. The AC test has been opened up as well in this game. There are 2 options now. One is the classic one where you fight 2 MTs that move around and act as basic training dummies, and the other is a new one that has lights that light up on the wall and act as small targets. This one is good for testing accuracy and the reactiveness of weapons. You can even get a reward for getting a good rank on this. It's a great addition. Speaking of menu changes, the arena is now put into ranks, so they can limit you on progress to the pace of the missions. This is a good thing. It helps pace the game better. It also telegraphs new part acquisitions as rewards and sets specific levels of power and skill that the enemy ACs have. As ACs get killed throughout the game's story, other Ravens get access to the arena, and there are a lot of potential Ravens that can appear in this state. Once you beat the game, however, you get access to all of them, and there are a lot of ACs here. The map design is much improved in this game. There is the return of the parking garage, which can restrict vertical movement. There is the wasteland, which offers ground cover and some wreckage in the middle of the stage. There is the reservoir, which is extremely large but open with no cover, and there are other good maps too. The parking garage has this mechanic where you can shoot out the lights. It's funny, when I was little playing this game on an old CRT, the lights being cut out made it so I couldn't see. I remember trying to squint and make out the details on the CRT, but it was all in vain. The Raven's descriptions in this game are a lot more serious, but they seem to be written from the arena organizer's perspective. Some of them are a little too honest. Can you imagine if you're having a rough time as a Raven and your description in the arena is like, yeah, their AC makes no sense and they're stupid for making it. It's oddly demeaning, but they can be kind of funny. That's the vibe I get from AC3 in general. It takes itself a lot more seriously and it pulls off this energy pretty well. The music pulls this theming together. The soundtrack really focuses on a leitmotif that's throughout the game, and it uses a lot of the same instruments to give this game this strong identity. It still has great listenable tracks in here, but they serve more of a purpose in this game. It exists to instill this specific and serious tone, and it works. You might not be jamming out to the menu music like in AC1, but it's got its own thing going for it. Now it does have some of its electronic roots, and it's still pretty great when these rise to the surface, like in the song Milk. Why is this song called Milk? The sound design has had a complete overhaul in this game. The audio doesn't peak as often, but the impact of most of the weapons and explosions still remain intact. Not everything here is an improvement, like this energy cannon that's kinda lame. Here's the thing, that's fine, because the GNL-15 exists. The grenade launcher, my beloved. The voice acting is solid, but it doesn't stand out too much. All of the voice roles take their bits seriously, and it is an improvement for the energy of the game, but the delivery of almost all the dialogue is a bit dry.
Raven, get moving. Clear a path for the transport.
Raven, security says there are MTs heading this way. We still don't have power.
You're just in time, Raven. We need all the help we can get.
The visuals in this game are much improved over AC2 and Another Age. Not very much on a technical level per se, but a polished one instead. Windows shatter when hit on certain buildings, effects are more flashy and satisfying, and everything just looks a little better. The UI has a lot more detail and is more refined. It can change looks if you have a different core equipped. The quad legs even have bespoke animations for walking. Overall, the presentation has had significant improvements, and the game still feels sharp because of it. It remains to be a pretty consistent 60 FPS, although it can dip sometimes. It is good enough to not be an issue, I find, and they do have some bigger fights than AC2 and Another Age, so they must have optimized it at least a little bit. The back of the box does mention the game having a new engine, but it looks so similar that I can't say if that's a definitive statement. Now, moving on to mission design, missions continue to remain unique and interesting to play through. The briefings remain good at describing the kind of dangers that you might face and are constantly changing things up. You go in with your AC, no healing or reloading, and have to accomplish your objective with the kit you go in with. There are ones where having a map is useful, there are some that become easier with speed, but none of these are completely necessary. AC3 in particular is very comfortable with you choosing whatever build you want, with the exception of some endgame missions. What really helps these is the fact that the weapon balance is excellent. Most weapons and parts are viable in this game, and while certain combinations will always be better than others, you can essentially roll with whatever you want. Even the shotguns are decent. Some AC games are better than others when it comes to part balance, and I personally think this is one of the best ones in that regard. Sniper rifles are good, machine guns are great, shotguns are good, bazookas are good, laser weapons are good, missile weapons are good, blades are good, orbital pods are good, everything is just really well balanced. The only exception being the new parrying blades, which are pretty jank to land. They also start to add some unique ranged weapons for the left hand, and these are pretty good. They have to be, otherwise why would you choose that instead of an infinite damage source in the laser blade? Though howitzer being a particular note, it has a high skill curve, but it's an amazing part. The economy is also really good in this game. The flow of cash and how much things cost is expertly balanced, and how often new parts get introduced into the store throughout the game is really well paced. The game just has this nice difficulty curve to it. None of the early game missions had this spike like 2 did, so you can go decently far with just a little bit of credits. Back onto missions, sometimes you'll get extra cash to spend on an ally, usually referred to in this game as consorts. These consorts are new to this game, and they are more than just allies. Regardless of whether or not they are an MT or an AC, they have their own description that explains what they're good at, and a stat graph. Most of these MTs you can select as allies eventually get full upgrades into ACs. When they do get an upgrade, they will mail you saying that they are ready to go and to not hesitate to call upon them when the need arises. It shows off their emblem, and they even get arena access eventually. This is really good. It adds some natural progression to the game via other people. It makes the game feel more alive, like others have some ambition. While consorts might seem like an unnecessary addition on paper, it really does improve the flow of the game. You can also ignore this system and just get extra money if you think you can handle said missions, so it's a great way to augment difficulty as well. Missions will also have some alternate forms depending on your performance. This can appear as extra enemies and dialogue if you complete objectives fast enough, like in the intro mission. There are also secret missions you can unlock if your performance in the mission is stellar, that appear as urgent assignments. You can either accept or deny these when prompted. When you accept, you get a refresh on your AP and ammo, and you're given an ad hoc briefing, and these are really cool. You usually get a lot of money or an excellent part as a reward. Missions also now have a ranking system in this game. You can earn anywhere from an E rank to an S rank. S ranks don't often get rewards, but they do inform how good you did in said mission. There are a couple of rewards you can get in very specific instances, but most of the hidden parts are from finding them in missions themselves or by accomplishing the mission in a specific way. S ranks are more for bragging rights and mastery over the game, and it does offer decent replay value. Let's get into the story and the setting. Now, this game is the first in this series to be a story reboot. It does not take place in the same world as Armored Core 1 or 2, and they are not connected in any way. This game does share similarities with previous games in the series, but we'll get to that in spoilers. The world is introduced with an AI called the Controller. The Controller rules over all and handles all major decisions in everyone's life. People took this for granted and grew complacent. They lived safe yet uninspired lives. Eventually, corporations arose in an attempt to gain power. They waged war with each other. Even this was under the influence of the Controller as it pulled the strings. Among the conflict, however, uncertainty and discontent is on the rise, and they start to rattle the current order. Conflict begets conflict, and people start to grow weary of this. This either leads to people in favor of their own freedom and agency, or trusting that the Controller will do the right things in their time of need. Most people are in the latter camp and don't trust in themselves to make their own decisions. This goes for the main corps as well, those being Crest, Mirage, and Kisaragi. Crest is one of the primary corporations. They are fully into the ideologue of the Controller's safety being the most important thing, even above their own interests. That doesn't mean they don't vie for themselves, but they care about upholding the Controller's ideas above all else. They also believe that they are the Controller's chosen, and they say they act in their stead. They make AC parts that they deem are high quality yet with good pricing. They also like the fact that their parts have a high survival rate. Mirage is one of the other primary corporations. They tended to take advantage of everything they can, especially if it can hurt another corporation. They tend to be less reliant on the Controller, but they still follow its dogma. They tend to make parts that are constantly incorporating new technology, and they believe it puts them on top. Kisaragi is more unknown, and they aren't really described in-game as having specific ethos on the current world state or what they believe in. However, from the mission briefings, we can gather that they are smaller than both Crest and Mirage. They engage in constant subterfuge and are seen manipulating the other corporations to their own advantage at times. They tend to make more esoteric and internal parts, never AC body parts. Global Cortex is the mercenary mediation group in this game, and they give you your mission briefings and keep an impartial stance on all matters. Lane Myers is your Global Cortex contact, as she helps keep you informed on current world events and helps you out during missions. She backs you up and gives you plenty of questions to rummage on. The game's setting this time around is important, and that's what is called layered. Humanity in this game lives in 4 layers, each with districts that have specific purposes. There are a couple sectors for residential living, nature, special research, waste disposal, energy production, and industrial research. The missions in each usually have specific theming that can link it back to the zone it's in. It's a small detail, but it's cool for the game's world building and helps give this particular title some identity. So as the game progresses, it appears extremely evident that something is wrong in Layered. Sectors become restricted for no reason, some decisions by the Controller are made for seemingly no reason, and conflict suddenly starts to spike. Things start to escalate when forces of unknown origin start randomly attacking points of importance, like a Crest laboratory. Past this part is where things start to go down, so this is the spoiler section of the video. Skip to this part if you want to play the game for yourself. The Controller from the beginning has been acting atypical, but that weirdness only continues to be more and more chaotic. Emails you get are consistently questioning as to why the Controller is making these decisions, with Crest and Mirage being especially befuddled. Crest constantly says it's not their place to judge and reason why the Controller is doing these actions, only to follow orders. Mirage, meanwhile, tries to take advantage of the situation, even at one point gaining technology that would allow them to manipulate the Controller, but ultimately not using it. This is where Union comes in. They are an organization whose ideas conflict with the primary ethos of the Controller. Their slogan on their emblem is, "Create the future." Sick. They want to lessen humanity's reliance on the controller. Union claims it is malfunctioning and not acting with intention. Crest attempts to stop Union from ruining what they see as a utopia, but that doesn't end up panning out when the controller just attacks everyone at random. Laird ends up in total chaos, with the controller's AI army leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. Vital power systems are damaged, with oxygen shortages, flooding, and radiation leaks being the biggest dangers. Mirage sends you in to discover the location of the controller, but they ambush you in said mission. One of the ravens they send in to kill you is one you helped become a raven herself. It's sad that we had to make enemies with someone we helped. Mirage decides that even if the controller has abandoned them, if you are able to stop this crisis, then you are even more dangerous than the controller, because you can be quote-unquote manipulated. As if they aren't being manipulated by their own fear. They tell the player that if they act in haste, everyone will be condemned. You're constantly asked if you're making the right choice, if humanity can even survive in Laird when it was designed to be run by the controller. When the controller in Laird was made with tech that is beyond what current humanity is at in the game, it puts this uncertainty into perspective. Of course people are going to worry when all they've ever known is under threat. You quell the major military threats that the controller has, and then you go into the controller's own district layer once Union discovers its location. You face a couple of advanced controller ACs and destroy the controller itself. It activates its final directive, which is releasing humanity from Laird to the surface. You see the surface, which has recovered from the war it had suffered from, and the game ends. When you consider the fact that the controller's final directive was to release humanity from Laird, I think it's certain that it had humanity's survival in its best interests, but it was malfunctioning and couldn't accomplish its directives. Considering the fact that it kept humanity alive and underground for so long that life could once again flourish on the surface, I'd say that it accomplished that particular goal. Silent Line adds some more complexity to the controller's motives, but we'll get to that later. One particular aspect I want to point out is that this game takes some major themes and ideas from Armored Core 1, but explores and expands on them. Armored Core 1 has themes of the corporation's struggle against each other and the consequences of that, AI, and control. I think Armored Core 2 expands on the corporations and what happens when they get power, and I think Armored Core 3, and Silent Line for that matter, focus on the AI and the control of AC1's story. It expands on them and creates a setting where people are conditioned to AI as the ruler by default. Focusing on that specifically with the new setting allows them to expand on these ideas more thoroughly. Armored Core 3's story is about defying complacency. It's all about showcasing people and organizations stuck in their ways, unwilling to try new things. Crest and Mirage even acknowledge that the controller is malfunctioning, and still they won't act. When given new chances and all the warning signs in the world that their society wants them killed, most are unwilling to save themselves. Never believing in their own decision making, they cling to their old ways, never accepting new ideas, and they limit their own potential because of it. Most would rather kill you rather than risk you being different and potentially changing how things are. In an already violent world, filled with death and uncertainty, they are more scared of the unknown than their already treacherous world. Humanity got used to its own leash. This game, in contrast with previous games in the series, puts its themes and story front and center, with corporate representatives constantly asking you if this is the right thing to do, and if they can trust you to make the right decisions when all of their options falter. It also tackles how people might not want free will even when given the chance, when all they've known is their current situation. When they don't know anything beyond their own world, it can be terrifying to have change in anything in your daily life. Even when your life is in danger, and you'd be so much better off when you're free to make your own decisions, it can be scary to make that first leap. In this situation, where humanity's life is on the line, it makes sense why most would act this way. It isn't exactly rational, but that's how people are. If you keep contemplating if it's the right decision to do and never act, you'll never know, trapped in stagnancy. This game is amazing. Once you beat the game, you unlock a couple of things. You can replay any mission you might have missed and get higher ranks, and that's a good thing. You might have noticed I didn't talk about Human Plus earlier, and that is because it has been replaced by a new optional part. OP Intensify is an optional part that is the new enhancement mechanic. It is great replay value, and you get rewards for doing content while it is equipped. While you have it equipped, when you do specific actions and missions, you will gain upgrades that Human Plus had. There are a lot more upgrades in this game from the previous installments, and they are hidden in some dubious places. There is enhanced booster performance, enhanced missile interception capabilities, enhanced radar functions, better targeting accuracy, various sensor functions, blade waves, enhanced cooling performance, enhanced cannon operation, enhanced turning performance, and increased blade range. I would recommend using a guide for getting these upgrades if you want them. This is a cool part, and having a price by taking up all of the player's optional part slots is a good sacrifice to have all of these broken abilities. It's also a good thing if you decide you don't want to use them anymore, you can just unequip them. You couldn't do that in previous games, so this is definitely an upgrade in terms of player choice. There's also a new mode that unlocks on the main menu as well. The EX Arena is post-game content that is a second arena you unlock after you beat the final mission, and it reuses a lot of the old arena combatants in a new context. Instead of one-on-one fights, you fight them in a team setup within a 2 versus 2 format. Now, there is a leader and a teammate rule, and if the leader dies, then that team loses the fight. You can choose from a selection of predetermined ravens as an ally, and still choose any of the maps you could before. The EX Arena is awesome. Choosing to fight and beat the leader first, or to take out a teammate first and then overwhelm the leader is cool. It also changes the dynamics of the maps as well, Structure suddenly being a way more interesting map, because of its 2 vertical layers on top and bottom can split fights into one-on-one fights for a split second. The Raven who finishes first can then ambush the opponent on the other layer because the crates on the floors or ceilings are destructible. The same applies to the Abandoned Factory, where the map is split into 2 sections. It has these upper pipes and rafters you can get up onto and sneak up on your opponent if they're not observant or preoccupied or want some advantage on them. The parking lot also changes from being a great map to limit the opponent's flight to a cramped and constrained map that can become extremely chaotic. You also need to choose a map to help your ally's abilities. If you choose Valkyrie as your ally and pick Parking Lot for example, you limit her style and kit. She likes to fly a lot, and giving her a low ceiling limits her. The EX Arena is an absolutely fantastic addition. It is great post-game content. This format extends to the multiplayer as well. You can system link with the iLink Firewire cable to play 2 versus 2 multiplayer, with 2 people max per console. You can also fill in missing slots with AI, so if you're playing with just one other person, you can play against 2 AI as a team or have 1 player per team with an AI teammate. You can fill in an AI on every single missing slot, up to 3 if you're just by yourself. There is a free-for-all mode and a team mode. The options that are opened up with 4-player multiplayer makes this mode have so many more options. The Karasawa and Moonlight also return with new looks in this game. They are pretty decent versions of those weapons. The Karasawa has a lamer look compared to AC2, and its sound isn't as sharp as AC2 either, but it's still a sick weapon and I really like it. The Moonlight also remains to be pretty cool. I like this look for it. I would say these iterations are somewhat balanced. Their weight is astronomical. You have to build your AC around these parts specifically, but you can still get results. Armored Core 3 is the best Armored Core game up until this point in the series, with loads of content and tons of features. It has a really nice difficulty curve, its part balance is good, and with the story being a reboot, it is easily my go-to recommendation if you want to try the old style of Armored Core. The story is thought-provoking, the gameplay is smooth and full of options, and the AC building and customization lets you go wild with so many options because of the parts viability. The game remains to look nice, and the soundtrack works with its visuals and story to instill the seriousness and desperation that works for this particular game. The story with its statements on free will and control remain impactful to me. It says a lot with what it represents, even if it is a little blunt. The post-game is the richest the series had seen by this point, with the 2v2 battles being particularly special. The only downside of this game are its controls. They can take some time getting used to, and the voice acting is a little dry. Other than that, it's a stellar game. Highly recommended. It really is a diamond in the rough. Armored Core Silent Line continues the tradition of AC expansion games, and this time around it's more like Master of Arena rather than Another Age, thankfully. Silent Line is a direct follow-up to AC3 and deals with the consequences of the things that happen in that game. It's mostly the same systems and structure, but it offers some interesting content and some unique features. Considering these games were only 8 months apart, what the? It makes sense as to why a lot of things are the same. Before we get carried away, let's cover some groundwork first. The intro cinematic initially showcases a satellite shooting a laser through an aircraft, which didn't look to be an outward threat, just passing over some land. The cinematic then shoots to an AC fight in an airport. It looks like there is one on defense with a lot of aggressors. This intro is extremely messy. It's well made with its tech and music, but the camera work makes no sense. There aren't establishing or slow shots to define who is on what side or what their roles are, or to see who is who. When we see these fast cuts between all these different things, we can't retain any of this info we are being given. The flagship AC with the Kurosawa seems to be defending the base because they are already there and reactive to the instigating fight, but later they shoot down some planes? It's not clear who is friend or foe. Are they working alone? There's an AC with cannon arms seen shooting the flagship AC, so they're on opposing sides, but they're only on that one shot, so you never see them again. There's an AC with a machine gun, a shield, and the missile extensions, and this one gets the most screen time. Even with all of the shots at this AC, it's from different angles with fast cuts at different moments, so in that moment, it is difficult to parse that it's the same AC being shown. This intro either needed a longer runtime, or a stronger focus on either segment of the intro. The section with the plane being shot down because it entered the silent line, that part's fine. It is communicating its events here with a consistent manner. The other fight is just really confusing. This CG intro either needed to be simplified or expanded on because there's too much happening at once. It ends up being forgettable, which really sucks because there are some cool things in it, like this final shot. The game begins by either the player loading an AC3 save to continue earning parts, or as a new game, and you get text on the current world state and the setting. After the events of Armored Core 3, humanity now lives above ground, free to choose for themselves, but this also freed the corporations to run wild with their own ambitions, which did include surface redevelopment. Those plans were slowed by some certain events, namely a specific area where anything that passes through it is never heard from again, a literal silent line. Corporate interests are conflicting with each other, and the fight for resources on land are becoming more extreme. There's an interesting quote from the intro. With the situation on the surface steadily escalating out of control, can there ever be hope for everlasting peace? All that has been recovered is on the brink of being lost yet again. My thoughts exactly, game. Peace does sound nice. You get access to the menu, and naturally, I went to the shop first. There weren't a lot of new options here. Most of the starting inventory is the AC3 inventory with some new parts. This does change later. One of Silent Line's main selling points is how many parts got added to this game. There are new parts everywhere in this game, from rewards you can obtain during missions to new ones you can just buy later once you progress more. All of the features from AC3 return, with some new ones as well. They added a first-person mode, and while it's neat that they remade the UI for this mode, the camera is put on the core and not the head. It feels very unnatural, and it makes these unchanged controls feel much more messy from this perspective. They also added an AI function. You can assign a specific AC you designate as an AI to train and fight like you. The way you train them isn't explained outside of the manual. You have to set a specific AC configuration inside the AI menu in the garage first. You then go to refight an arena opponent, and you have the option to select your AI AC instead. You play as this AC, and the game takes your playstyle from this match and adapts the AI to the way you play. The more you play as this specific AC, the better it becomes. It can learn some bad habits, so that's something to keep in mind. You can also only have one AI per save file, and that can be restrictive when you can't change their kit without resetting their learning. Regardless, you can then take this AI and put them into the AI arena. This feature is like the Master of Arena creation feature, where you can make your own arena and fight your own AI, or challenge others. This is a great add if someone is in love with this part set and gameplay. They can essentially create unique gameplay for themselves. It takes a while to create decent AIs, especially if you want more than 2. It's a creative tool, and some people might not get a lot out of this if they don't want to engage with it, but that's fine. It doesn't get in the way of other options. I did end up making my own arena. It's pretty neat to see something you've made come to life. All of the gameplay and structure is the same as AC3. You can choose to progress in either the arena or missions, and the pace of the game is like a regular Armored Core game if the story was slightly faster. The game in terms of a standard playthrough isn't as long as 3, but it offers an extended experience. It feels very natural if played right after AC3. The content is similar, but it's intentionally similar. On to missions, they remain as varied as AC3, if not more so. They take place in specific sectors of the continent that humanity arose from, and there are a lot of open spaces to reflect that. The difficulty is pretty high in this game, but it's not unmanageable for most of its runtime. There are a couple of final missions that I struggled with, but most of it is just tough. There are a couple that suck due to their employing of combat rooms in cramped spaces, or these enemies that do a lot of damage and are extremely small and move fast. These enemies suck. The only solution is to get close so you can hit them, but you have to take damage killing them. Most of the missions don't have these little dudes, so it doesn't affect the game too much. Other enemies remain dangerous, but most of them have specific tendencies that can be exploited and dealt with. There is a cool mission that is like an advanced qualification exam, where you and 2 other ACs are in the same testing arena that is like the AC test with the targets on the walls. Whoever hits the most targets after 3 minutes wins and will be put on a waiting list for an extremely difficult mission. They only want the best of the best. Here's the twist. The other 2 ACs are pretty aggressive, and they will attack you when there is a lull in targets. They won't hesitate to rinse you. There are a couple strategies you can employ. Be hyper aggressive and try to kill both of them and use that remaining time to focus on shooting targets, or you could be agile and just run away, and as they are fighting each other, shoot at the targets yourself. Other than a couple of bad moments mentioned earlier, the missions are usually great, but pretty tough. While I do think this might hurt someone's experience if they start with this game rather than carrying over a save file, so much of this game is just continuing the experience of AC3 that I wouldn't recommend skipping it for this one. So much of the story is expanding on the consequences of AC3. I imagine people would struggle more than just the difficulty if they were to start with this game first. It does limit Silent Line's appeal in particular, but considering that it was designed as a direct sequel as to Chapter 2, I think it's fine. Not every game has to be designed as an entry point. Going into detail on the parts, the way you unlock these can depend on each part. A lot you can unlock by just progressing in the game as they become available in the shop to purchase. Some you unlock by having certain parts equipped, mainly leg types. Some you get doing specific corporate missions. A lot are found by achieving missions with specific criteria, and there are so many parts here. There's a mission with 5 hidden parts. You get parts from the arena milestones. There are some where you get S ranks or fast clears on missions. The game is absolutely full of secrets. While there are less missions than AC3, each one has more rewards for mastery and each one remains unique. Talk about replay value. This game added a staggering 198 parts to the set, along with the 231 parts from AC3. That's a lot of options. Now, some of these are just alternate versions of already existing weapons, but I think they're also valuable additions regardless. Now, a lot of the parts that they added are a ton of left-handed parts, namely, a lot of unique weapons. There are a lot of choices here, and a lot of them are good. Using both right and left-handed parts while trying to boost all with your thumb can be a little dumb. I found using weapons you only have to use every once in a while was more effective on the control side of things, rather than having something like a machine gun where you have to hold the button consistently. ACs look pretty cool when gunning down their opponent with 2 guns at once, so that's cool. Let's cover the presentation real quick before the story. The visuals of this game are on the same level of AC3, and while some people might look at that as a negative, I really like the AC3 visuals, so it's fine. The music is a lot more focused on beats and its new theme, and I really like this soundtrack. still keeps that same AC3 instrumentation and feel, but higher energy and more varied in terms of style. It's pretty good, keeping up the tradition of naming songs in the soundtrack the most random things. It's got soul, you know? So, we've talked about the basics, but what actually happens in this game? The game's main themes are about AI and power, and the game covers these pretty well. As the game progresses, it becomes clear that because the corporations from 3 are now free to do whatever they want, they start to engage in vain power struggles over resources and land. Whatever will gain them an advantage, they will use and exploit. They see an opportunity, they take it. The Artificial Intelligence Office enters the scene, having significant advancements in the field of AI. They start creating tech and distributing it among the world, and the corporations take advantage of it. Crest in particular creates an entire defensive stronghold that is just run on AI. A representative from the AI office, Sarah Cross, gets in the habit of messaging the player about her thoughts on the current world events and certain ideas after you take a mission where you save an AI office building. She sends the player some interesting messages and tries to get the player to ask questions on the morality of the current world. Emma Sears, your contact from Global Cortex, sends you more relevant details about the missions you do and information on current events. She describes the AI office as a think tank who develops AI protocols for a variety of equipment. It says they've got some shady stuff going on. As the game progresses, you get some dangerous missions, like this one where you have to defend this outpost from an invading force as the satellite constantly barrages the battlefield. This outpost was made too close to the silent line you see, so something reacts and attempts to attack you. Sarah Cross emails you, curiously wondering why everyone would try to get into the silent line. They've sustained so many losses, and yet they persist. Why wouldn't they just ignore it, heed this warning, and run? Are they that curious? Should they change their actions? She actively prods the player, asking you to ask and rummage these same questions, and wanting you to ask further questions. I'm gonna go into the spoiler zone, so if you care about the story and want to see where it goes yourself, then go play it and skip here. I think this game's neat. Mirage has you go into Old Layered to the remnants of the controller to secure the area so they can scan the controller's data and see any information about the silent line that might be potentially there. Crest deduced that the same tech that is fueling the silent line probably has something to do with the tech that fueled Layered. Turns out they were right on the money, because Mirage discovers this plan and sends you in to get that data instead, and they do get that data. They learn of the satellite's inner workings and plans to take control of this satellite to gain exclusive access to the silent line so they can start exploration and development of the region. They send you into the satellite with one other AC to clear it out of threats and to explore its general layout. Sarah emails you about this, asking you what you think Mirage will do with that kind of power. She brings up how humankind had a long history of misusing power that had been entrusted to them. She says how the controller was created in part to keep humanity from repeating the same mistakes that they had made, but how this seems to be happening anyway. She leaves the player with one question. What do you think, Raven? Is humankind once again headed down the path of self-destruction? Can they ever learn to wield power responsibly? Notice how she seems very disconnected and impersonal, not referring to humans as people or other things, but specifically humankind. Crest discovers Mirage's plan to hijack the satellite and tries to stop them by attacking their headquarters. You prevent this when Mirage hires you to protect their capital building, and you are informed that a state of martial law has been declared in all states under corporate control. This isn't because of Crest, but rather all of the recent technology affected by the recent AI tech boom has gone out of control. Mirage's AI-controlled units, Crest's unmanned fortresses, and the satellite cannon have all gone haywire. People believe it had to do with Mirage attempting to integrate its own system with the satellite, which caused a chain reaction to most AI-driven things across the continent. Sarah emails you one final time, and she tells you that a choice has been made, and that those choices have consequences. I wonder what the end results will be. One thing is for certain, if the choice was made in error, it must be corrected. You stop a lot of threats that emerged by this wave of affected AI, including the satellite cannon in a desperate mission where a lot of Ravens and all corps are involved, and some Ravens get crushed.
They're everywhere! I can't move!
They're everywhere! I'm hit!
Through disabling the satellite weapon, you get access into the Silent Line, in which there is an origin point of all of the AI office's dealings. No one had ever met anyone from the organization face to face, which is pretty silly in hindsight. It's also where the AI override signal was transmitted from, so something is definitely there. You discover the location of a relay center that transmits a specific signal, and in a joint mission with all Corps and multiple Ravens, you discover the location of a relay center that transmits a specific signal, and in a joint mission with all Corps and multiple Ravens, discover the relay's giant generator with an advanced machine guarding it. You hear what I assume is Sarah's voice. She sounds shocked to see you in particular. Emmett tells you after the mission that they found remains of a second layered in Silent Line, the signal's point of origin. She tells you to be careful and wonders if the answers that will be found down there will be doom or renewed hope. They give you your final mission. Go in there, locate the source of the signal, and destroy whatever's producing it. This beginning room in the mission has this specific light source that reminds me of the lights that represented the Raven's Nest in AC1. It's not the same, but it has some semblance to it. You hear Sarah's voice.
Checking serial number. XA26483. Registration confirmed.
It establishes some kind of connection with you, and you learn its true name, Ibis. It establishes its final directive and does battle with you.
Scanning target. Target scan. Progress. Adapting systems. Scanning. Confirmation check. Disconnecting. Reverting to safe mode. Main system shutdown. XA26483. My function is complete.
Raven. The rest is up to you.
Raven, can you hear me? Raven, please copy. Over.
You beat them, they perish, and the game ends with a cutscene of a similar plane from the intro, crossing the Silent Line, but this time with no danger. I think Ibis was watching humanity to see how they react to the Silent Line's actions and to deem if humanity was worthy of power and of their own free will. When Mirage makes a move to take over the satellite, it says no, and moves to destroy them and all corporations. This is another layered, and it is not explicit if humans died out there or if they ever lived there in the first place. However, there is a small detail here, and it's the fact that when entering Silent Layered, Ibis gives you a new registration number, just like the controller at the beginning of AC3. Consider the fact that the registration number was not something like XA1, but instead it was XA26483. I think this is intentionally cluing you into the idea that you are not the first human to be in this layered, and this leads me to believe that this is a layered where humans died out long ago, considering the registration number for the AC3 protagonist was 0824 FK3203. This string's a lot longer than the Silent Layered's numbers. I think this implies that humanity died a long time ago in Silent Layered. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it's interesting to think about. Regardless, it is clear that it is the same kind of AI like the controller, except still fully functioning and observing humanity. Ibis being confused as to why people would want to go into its own zone led it to being interested in this new group of humanity. I imagine the initial act of protecting the Silent Line was an act of defense, and then used this as a tool to test them, and humanity failed its test. It's clearly an intelligence that's pretty advanced, and foresaw the signs of devastating destruction that sent humanity underground in the first place, and wanted to prevent that from happening again. Humanity has the potential to be too dangerous, and we prove that by destroying them. It's a sad outlook, and it had the right ideas, but acting out like that unified humanity against it by giving them a common enemy. Ibis didn't initially go on the offense, it was mostly acting in self-defense until it launched its all-out attack on humans. But did it even have a choice? If Mirage was successful in controlling the satellite weapon, they would have become the ultimate superpower, and Ibis would have been left very vulnerable. They were right. Corporations cannot be trusted with that much power. As the Armored Core series has established, mega corporations won't stop with some success. They will do everything they can to have everything. They ultimately condemned Ibis with their own greed, and I think it's pretty sad. Ibis was clearly sentient, and it didn't want this conflict to end up in this specific way. The corporations being on top of political power means that they can never acquire massive martial power if humanity is to ever survive. So there is one other thing I want to bring up, and that's the fact that I think the player character of this game is supposed to be a woman. That flagship AC that is in the intro is supposed to be the main character, right? Usually the intro AC or cover art AC is either the player character like with the PS1 trilogy, AC3 in the case of the Japanese box, and AC4, or a non-playable character like Zenaida in Last Raven or White Clint in For Answer, or some AC affiliated with a specific corporation, like an AC2, with that being the Zero Matrix AC. With that intro, we can narrow down the flagship as the first one. And if you go by the promotional materials online for the game, or the manual, it depicts that new AC with a woman being next to it. It's more than we usually get in terms of showing actual humans. It's something, but the game's English localization still refers to the player as a dude, so it's debatable. What do you think? There's also this wallpaper for the PSP version of the game that's... Wow, that's pretty sick, but it's so silly. This title's post-game content is the same as AC3, with a new arena, more classic arena opponents, and unlocking parts that you might have missed. There are a lot of parts to discover and plenty of opportunities to use said parts with the new content, so it remains pretty content-rich. They added a classic super weapon to the game, the Finger. It makes its marvelous return. Oh no! That's okay. There's plenty of other interesting options for parts in this game, like these back boosters.
Sensational.
These are so sick. Probably my favorite added part. There's an interesting note about the extra arena in this game in particular. That's how you can take your AI you train in fights to fight with you. I didn't find this more effective than just using an A-rank Raven, but it's really cool to see your AI that you trained fight and kick butt alongside you. Very cool. The multiplayer in Silent Line is pretty much the same from AC3, but they opened up a couple of options. The team mode by default has it so when the leader dies, the team loses. They added an option so both team members need to be defeated for the other team to win. They also made the time limit selection more modular and break weapon? Huh? So I guess weapons can break if they are struck multiple times, but through my 2 playthroughs of the game, I never saw this mechanic once. Regardless, this is a pretty decent multiplayer mode. There are a lot of arena maps in this game in particular, so that's pretty neat. Silent Line, like other AC expansions, is mostly more of the same. The gameplay and visuals are nearly the exact same as Armored Core 3. This isn't a negative though. This game is a fantastic companion piece to AC3, continuing its strengths with a good soundtrack and thought-provoking story. The game practically begs you to ask questions, inviting you to think deeper about its events and story. With most Armored Core games usually wanting you to dig deeper, this one actively trying to engage with the player makes it stand out amongst its peers in this aspect. It's pretty messy with some cruel missions, the first person mode being jank and the intro being straight up befuddling is weird, but the game pulls past that to be a pretty great experience. If you enjoy AC3, you should absolutely play Silent Line afterwards. It's a great extension piece. Nowadays, how would you actually play these games? Emulation is your best bet here. The explosion of interest in Armored Core has caused these games' prices to skyrocket, and while games like AC2 are able to tank the hit, Armored Core 3 and Silent Line weren't able to. The prices of these games are pretty high for the secondhand market, and considering the fact that specifically getting PlayStation 2 games up and running on modern displays can be a hassle and expensive, it isn't worth the hassle unless if you already have that setup. Just as a heads up, you should use the nightly build of PCSX 2, it runs a lot better. There are different versions of these games to keep in mind as well, and those being the portable versions on PSP, they work on Vita, and you can bind the game in a specific way to have twin-stick control. It still has issues on the control aspect though, but having it on Vita definitely helps. These releases have a few new parts and a couple of new arena opponents, but the menu's presentation and framerate take massive hits. They're cool for PSP games and would have been great in their time, but nowadays they are not the definitive versions of these games. I personally prefer having smoother performance rather than finicky twin-stick controls, but if portability matters to you, then go for it. The third gen of Armored Core starts off extremely strong. Armored Core 3 and Silent Line are this pretty well contained duology about AI, freedom, and power that fit together really well. The game's both dealing with AI being known to the world and how people adjust to that, how corporations operate with and without those constraints, and how this affects every aspect of the world makes these games feel so special. The comments of free will and how most don't even desire it really speaks on how people can be conditioned to be content with complacency. When most don't even realize they are trapped, they lack the will to try and break free in the first place. On a video game level, both have worthwhile content, great moments, and fun fights. Both have better flow than the previous games with the arena changes, the part balance is the best it ever has been, and the presentation is at the point where I wouldn't ever be disappointed if it didn't change. These games have just so much soul. You can tell From Software put their A game into these two releases. Like the original Armored Core, every part of these games comes together to create a cohesive experience. AC3 and Silent Line go on to create my personal favorite duology in the entire series. Both games are just consistently great. While I do think other games can rise above Silent Line specifically, AC3 belongs up there with the best of the series, not to mention the fact that the story is a reboot and the difficulty curve is pretty forgiving. AC3 specifically is my go-to recommendation if you want to try an old-style Armored Core. Now, out of the norm for Armored Core, 3rd Gen has 4 primary games with AC3, Silent Line, Nexus, and Last Raven, with 2 spin-offs being Formula Front and Ninebreaker. This gen is huge, and it starts off on an absolutely amazing foot. Now that the best of the series had been defined, it was time to make some overhauls and to implement new ideas. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, it means a lot. So this past month and a half has been insane for game releases for me. Void Stranger and Bomber Cyberpunk seemingly coming out of nowhere and just being absolutely earth-shattering to me has kept me really busy. Oh, and Armored Core 6. That game has way more to it than I thought. I haven't even seen everything yet. And then I got sick for like a week. Just an absolute disaster in terms of free time. Do all that stuff YouTube likes, and I'm going back into Void Stranger for a bit. Then we're gonna go into Armored Core Nexus and Last Raven. See you later.